Imagine you're at a summer cookout. You see a young father walk up to his toddler, and he's holding this, perfectly grilled, juicy hot dog.
The classic scene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he expects the kid's eyes to light up, maybe even see a little drool.
Of course, that's the expected reaction.
But the baby just stares at it.
Yeah.
Completely indifferent. No salivation, no excitement, just this blank look.
Which feels wrong somehow.
It feels totally wrong.
Yeah.
We're just so used to this idea that food makes us hungry, and we assume it's this biological reflex we're born with. You think of Pavlov's dogs, and you just assume the sight of a meal is the ultimate trigger.
Right. It seems like the most basic foundational truth. Food equals drool.
But watching that moment, you realize there's this massive gap between what we think is natural instinct and what we've actually been trained to feel. I saw a room full of students get tripped up on this exact thing. The question was, is a juicy hot dog an unconditioned stimulus for salivation? And almost everyone just jumped to yes.
It feels like common sense. It's intuitive.
It is. But then the professor asks one single question that just changes the whole logic. Would a baby reflexively respond to it?
And the answer is a hard no. A baby has no idea what that is.
A flat no. And that realization that our most basic physical reactions are often learned associations, not innate instincts, that really strikes a chord. It's the difference between a reflex you're born with and a connection your brain spent years building.
That's the whole game right there. The shift from this is just biology to, wait, I was taught to drool at this.
It reveals how little we get about why we do what we do. It turns out that a lot of what we call classic psychology isn't as simple as a ringing bell. If we can't even trust our own salivation to be natural, what else are we getting wrong about how our brains are wired? That hot dog scenario is really our mission statement for this deep dive. We're jumping right into that gap, the space between the innate reaction and the learned connection, to show how complex even the most foundational parts of psychology really are.
And that's really the heart of it. The core of behavioral psychology lies in making that exact distinction. The critical challenge is identifying whether a response is an innate biological reflex, something you have from infancy.
The unconditioned response.
Right. Or if it's a learned association that you've picked up from your environment. It's really the difference between nature and history.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the core vocabulary of classical conditioning.
Yeah.
There are these four essential elements that are like the code for understanding this type of learning.
The building blocks.
Yeah. Unconditioned stimulus, or UCS. Unconditioned response, UCR. Then conditioned stimulus, CS. And conditioned response, CR.
Right. And let's anchor this with the most reliable starting point. The unconditioned stimulus, the UCS, this is something that naturally, automatically triggers a response without any prior learning.
No training required.
None whatsoever. It's a biological event. And the key rule, the one that trips everyone up with the hot dog, is that you do not have to learn to respond to the UCS. The response just happens. It's automatic.
So we're talking about things that are truly universal. Like not just the smell of your favorite dinner, but the smell of any food when you're starving.
Exactly. The actual smell of food being ingested causes hunger. A sudden loud noise causes a startle response. You jump. You don't learn to jump.
You just do it.
You just do it. Even the physiological effects of, say, a strong dose of caffeine, that initial alertness is a UCS. It hits your nervous system directly. And the reflex that follows, that's the unconditioned response, the UCR. The salivation, the jump, the alertness.
Okay, so if the UCS is the natural trigger, then the conditioned stimulus, the CS, is the one that has a history. It starts out as completely meaningless.
A neutral stimulus, or NS, it means nothing.
Right, but after it gets paired over and over again with that UCS, it starts to gain power. It acquires the ability to trigger a learned response all by itself.
Which brings us right back to the cookout.
To the hot dog.
The taste of the hot dog, putting it in your mouth, that's the true UCS. That's what kicks off the digestive mechanism, the UCR.
But the sight of it.
The sight of it is totally neutral to an infant. It only becomes a conditioned stimulus after that sight is repeatedly paired with the experience of tasting the food. So the drooling that an adult does just by looking at it, that's a conditioned response. It's a learned copy of the real thing.
And this entire foundation was, of course, cemented by Ivan Pavlov's work with his dogs. It's such a simple experiment, but the implications are just profound.
We really are. Pavlov showed that digestion starts way before food ever enters the mouth. When he put food powder in the dog's mouth, that was the UCS. The salivation was the UCR. pure reflex.
But then he introduced the bell.
His genius was systematically introducing something neutral, a bell, a tone, and pairing it again and again with the food. And through that pairing, the bell became the conditioned stimulus.
And pretty soon the bell alone was enough.
Exactly. The dog would salivate the conditioned response at just the sound of the bell. It was clear proof that an association had been built in the brain between the sound and the expectation of food.
And that transition from a simple physical reflex to a learned emotional response is what makes this so relevant to us. I mean, so many phobias and anxieties are basically just conditioned responses.
Oh, absolutely. They're created when you pair a really negative unconditioned experience with something that used to be neutral.
Like getting into a car accident.
Perfect example. The crash itself is the unconditioned stimulus. It produces this automatic, profound trauma, that's the UCR. But if that trauma gets paired with the context of driving, maybe the smell of the car or a specific highway, those things become the conditioned stimulus.
So just getting on the highway can trigger the fear.
Yes. The fear of driving becomes the CR. It's a learned defensive reaction that gets triggered by cues that were once totally meaningless but are now associated with danger.
And the most famous or maybe infamous example of this is the Little Albert experiment.
Right, with John B. Watson. He and Rosalie Rayner specifically wanted to show that you could basically manufacture an emotional reaction in a baby.
It's a powerful demonstration, even if the ethics are questionable today.
Highly questionable. But what they did was they showed Albert a bunch of things: a white rat, a rabbit, some masks. He wasn't afraid of any of them. Then they took the white rat and paired it with this incredibly loud, terrifying noise.
They hit a metal pipe with a hammer behind his head.
Yeah. So the loud noise was the UCS, and the crying, the startle, was the UCR. By repeatedly pairing the rat, which started as a neutral stimulus with that noise, they successfully created a conditioned fear reaction to the rat alone.
And the fear spread, right.
It generalized. It spread to other furry white things. He became afraid of a Santa Claus mask. The learned association bled over.
It's amazing how effective and fast it is.
Yeah.
You see the same mechanism used everywhere today, especially in advertising.
Constantly. Think about a car commercial. They use uplifting music, beautiful scenery, attractive people, things that are meant to make you feel good naturally.
That good feeling is the UCR.
Precisely. The music and images are the UCS. And because the car, the product, is always right there alongside those things, the car becomes the CS. The goal is that when you see that car on the street, you get a little flash of that positive feeling, a conditioned response that has nothing to do with the car itself.
And you see the darker side of this in addiction science. The cues can become just as powerful as the drug itself.
It's a devastatingly clear example. For a smoker, nicotine is the UCS. The pleasure or relief from the chemical change in the brain, the dopamine hit, that's the UCR.
But over time,
everything associated with smoking, the cigarette pack, the lighter, the specific chair you sit in, the bar you go to, all of those become conditioned stimuli.
So just seeing a lighter can trigger a craving.
A powerful one. That's called cue reactivity. Those cues, through association, can trigger an intense drug-seeking response, even if the person is trying to quit and the physical dependence is long gone.
It's so clear that this idea of associative learning is way broader than just simple reflexes. We're talking about a fundamental mental connection between concepts, events, mental states, all of it stemming from experience.
Right. It goes way beyond classical conditioning. Associative learning is this huge umbrella. It covers semantic word associations, stimulus pairings, a whole spectrum of cognitive connections that don't even need a primary biological trigger to work.
And that distinction brings us to the second massive branch of behavioral psychology, which works on a totally different principle: operant conditioning.
A complete shift in focus.
Right. If classical conditioning is about learning reflexes and anticipation, operant conditioning is about learning voluntary action. It's about the connection between a behavior and the consequence that follows it.
This all really goes back to Edward Thorndike's law of effect. It's over a century old, but the principle is so elegant and enduring.
Which is basically that actions followed by good things are repeated, and actions followed by bad things are not.
That's the essence of it. Behaviors that lead to a satisfying state of affairs get stronger. Behaviors that lead to an unpleasant consequence get weaker. The classic example is a rat in a box. It learns to press a lever. If pressing it gets food, the behavior strengthens. If pressing it results in a shock, the behavior weakens.
And B.S. Skinner really expanded on this, giving us the vocabulary we use today, especially this idea of contingency.
Yes, contingency is key. It's that reliable if-then connection. If I do this behavior, then this consequence reliably follows.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the 4 core contingencies of operant conditioning, we have to basically throw out our everyday understanding of the words positive and negative.
This is the #1 stumbling block. You have to reset your vocabulary. The rule is strictly mathematical. Positive means you are adding something, a plus sign. Negative means you are removing something, a minus sign.
And reinforcement means you're trying to make the behavior happen more often.
Strengthening it.
While punishment means you're trying to make it happen less often.
Weakening it.
Yeah.
So let's break down those 4 combinations.
Let's start with the 2 types of reinforcement, since they're both about strengthening a behavior. Positive reinforcement is the one everybody feels they know.
It's the most intuitive one. You introduce a rewarding stimulus right after a behavior to make that behavior more likely to happen again. Something good is added.
Like giving a dog a treat for shaking hands. You add the treat, the handshaking gets stronger.
Perfect. Or getting a laugh from a crowd when you tell a joke. You add the laugh, and the joke telling is reinforced. Even with substance use, the high or the buzz is added after the act of smoking, which powerfully reinforces that voluntary behavior.
Okay, that one's clear. Now for the one that messes everyone up. Negative reinforcement.
Right, and the confusion is all in that word negative. It is not punishment.
It's still reinforcement. It's still strengthening a behavior.
Exactly. Negative reinforcement is when you remove an aversive stimulus, something unpleasant, to make the environment better. And that removal reinforces the action you just took.
So you're escaping or avoiding something bad.
Precisely. Let's say you have a headache. That's the aversive stimulus. Taking an aspirin removes the headache. So the act of taking aspirin is negatively reinforced.
Which makes you more likely to take one next time.
Yes, or fastening your seatbelt. It removes that annoying beeping sound. The removal of the beep reinforces buckling up. It's all about making something bad go away.
And these 2 things can interact in really powerful ways.
The Homer Simpson example is the classic case. A child is whining and pestering for a toy.
The whining is the aversive stimulus for the parent.
Exactly. When the parent finally gives in and buys the toy, their giving in behavior is immediately negatively reinforced because the terrible whining stops. It goes away.
Ah, I see. But at the same time?
At the same time, the child's whining behavior is positively reinforced because they got what they wanted. The toy was added.
Wow. So both behaviors get stronger, creating this perfect storm of a feedback loop.
A destructive but incredibly powerful interlocking cycle.
Okay, so now for the punishment contingencies, which are all about weakening a behavior.
Right. First is positive punishment. This is where you add an aversive stimulus after a behavior to make it less likely to happen again.
So this is what people usually think of as punishment. A spanking or a sharp reprimand.
Yes. A spanking is added after the child plays in the mud. The consequence is added. The mud playing behavior is weakened. Or if you try a new deodorant and it gives you a painful rash, the rash is added, weakening your use of that product.
A speeding ticket is a good one too.
Perfect. The ticket and the fine are added to your life, which is meant to weaken speeding behavior.
And last, we have negative punishment.
This is where you remove something desirable after a behavior to make that action stop.
Like a timeout.
Exactly. A timeout removes access to fun toys or social interaction. Losing your driver's license after a DUI removes the privilege of driving. A teacher taking a student's phone removes a desirable object. In all cases, something good is taken away to decrease the misbehavior.
It seems like the key to analyzing any of these is to focus only on the behavior and the thing that happens immediately after it.
Absolutely critical. You can't confuse the consequence with what came before it, the antecedent. Rain is the antecedent that signals you might need an umbrella. The consequence of using one is staying dry, which is negative reinforcement. The focus has to be on the action and its immediate result.
This is already so much more complex than just a bell and a dog. But it gets even more fascinating when you realize the brain doesn't just make one link, it builds chains.
Yes, it builds connections between things that have never even been directly paired with the original motivator.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This is higher order conditioning.
HOC is just fundamental to how memory and learning work as a network. It's how value, good or bad, can spread across your memory from one cue to another through an intermediary.
So the brain is essentially making an inference. Like, if A predicts B and B predicts C, then A must also predict C.
It's a cognitive shortcut. And the field has 2 classic designs for this. The crucial difference between them is just the order in which you do the training. That procedural difference changes everything about what's being learned.
Okay, so what's the first design?
The first is second-order conditioning, or SOC. In this one, you establish the main conditioned stimulus first.
So light is paired with food until the light makes the dog drool. That's step one.
Correct. The light, CS1, has value. Only then do you move to phase 2. You start pairing a new thing, like a bell, with the light. Bell, then light. Bell, then light.
And the bell is never paired with the food directly.
Never. But eventually the bell alone will make the dog salivate. It has acquired value entirely through its connection to the light.
So the light acts like a stand-in for the food, a surrogate reinforcer.
It does. But what's fascinating is what the dog actually learns. Early research showed that if you then extinguish the light, you show the light over and over without food until the dog stops caring, it doesn't always reduce the response to the bell.
Wait, how is that possible?
It suggests that in SOC, the bell might be linked more directly to the emotional state caused by the food, the feeling of hunger or anticipation, rather than the specific memory of the light.
Wow. Okay, so what's the second design?
The second one is the reverse. It's called sensory preconditioning, or SPC. Here, you start by pairing two totally neutral stimuli together.
Before any food is involved.
Right. Phase 1 is just pairing a tone and a light together. Tone, light. Tone, light. Over and over. Neither one has any value yet. They're just linked in time.
Okay.
Then, in phase 2, you take just one of them, say the tone, and you pair it with food until the tone makes the dog drool.
And because the light was already linked to the tone.
The light also now makes the dog drool, even though the light was never, ever paired with the food.
So in this case, the link is purely sensory at first.
And that changes what's learned. In SPC, if you extinguish the tone, so the tone loses its predictive power, the response to the light also goes away.
Ah, because its value was entirely dependent on its link to the tone.
Exactly. It proves that just changing the order of training fundamentally alters the associative structure that gets built in the brain.
That's incredible. What else influences how strong these chains become?
Well, 3 things are really important. First, stimulus similarity. HOC works much better and faster when the 2 stimuli, S1 and S2, are from the same category, like 2 different colors or 2 shapes. The brain finds it easier to link similar inputs.
That makes sense.
Second, the stimulus arrangement. If you present the 2 stimuli at the same time, overlapping, it's better for creating that sensory S2-S1 link you need for SPC. But if you present them in a series, with S2 coming just before S1, that's better for learning the predictive value you need for SOC.
And I imagine the number of times you do it matters a lot.
Profoundly. Higher order fear conditioning can be really fast. Just a few trials can be enough. But reward learning can take dozens, even up to 100 trials to really solidify. And there's a catch. If you do too many of the S2-S1 pairings in second order conditioning, the effect can actually reverse. S2 stops being a signal for the reward and can actually become a conditioned inhibitor, a signal for the absence of the reward. It's a very delicate balance.
All of this confirms that associative learning isn't just about reflexes or actions. It's the very structure of our internal life, our memory, our mood.
Yes. Memory itself is just a dense network of associations. A person's face instantly brings up their name, memories, feelings. Neurologically, we know that damage to the hippocampus impairs the ability to form these new associations between objects. It's the absolute foundation of complex learning.
And it goes beyond just facts. It shapes our entire mental context.
That's where mood comes in. A mood is like this global, diffuse, associative context. If you're in a negative mood, you're far more likely to retrieve negative associated memories, which just keeps the mood going. It's a powerful feedback loop.
And this brings us back to those purely cognitive connections, the ones that don't need a biological trigger at all. Semantic associations.
Right. I say salt, you think.
Pepper. Instantly.
Exactly. That's a powerful learned association based purely on them appearing together in time and space over and over. There's no UCS, no consequence. It's just a stimulus pairing in your cognitive network.
And this ability to layer meaning onto the world creates this dense personal map for each of us.
It really does. I read the story about an artist in London, Julian, who felt this wave of melancholy every time he saw a salt shaker.
Not a biological reflex.
No, it was a complex cognitive chain. The white crystals were semantically linked in his mind to the phrase salt of the earth, which was a phrase his late grandfather used to use all the time.
Oh.
So the visual cue, the salt shaker, triggered a linguistic concept, salt of the earth, which was tied to a powerful emotional memory of his grandfather. It shows how our minds turn the most mundane things into this incredibly complex map of relationships.
So if these associations are so ingrained, and so often operating below our conscious awareness. How do we even measure them?
That's where tools like the implicit association test, or IAT, come in. It was designed to measure the strength of these subconscious connections between concepts by measuring reaction time.
The basic idea being, if two things are strongly linked in your mind, you'll be much faster at pairing them together.
Precisely. A faster reaction time indicates a stronger, more accessible association. The IAT produces a D-score, which is a quantitative measure of that difference in reaction time between pairing concepts that are congruent in your mind versus incongruent.
And it's not just a simple stopwatch, right? The calculation is pretty complex.
Oh, it's a sophisticated process. It filters out trials that are too fast or too slow. It computes mean response times for the key stages. And then it standardizes that difference using statistical measures to control for an individual's overall speed. It's a robust way to quantify these hidden mental links.
This whole dive has just been about nuance. We started with a hot dog and found out even drooling is learned. We talked about operant conditioning, where negative means removing something.
Yeah.
Then higher order chains, where just the order of training changes everything.
Yeah.
So if these foundational theories are so easy to misunderstand, how do we make sure we teach them and learn them correctly?
That's the critical question. And the pervasive difficulty of these concepts is exactly why active learning strategies are so essential. We have to have ways to challenge our own intuitions.
Right.
I read about a student, Chloe, who was struggling with conditioned emotional responses. It took a targeted think, pair, share exercise with a classmate for her to realize that her intense emotional reaction to a movie soundtrack wasn't innate. It was a complex, learned association tied to a past event. Peer discussion is what broke it open for her.
And the think, pair, share model is kind of the gold standard for that, isn't it?
It is. It's so flexible and powerful. The structure is key. First, the think phase. Everyone gets silent time to process individually. That's so important.
And you pair up.
Yes, the pair phase, you have to explain your thoughts, verbalize them, which helps clarify your own thinking, and you get immediate feedback. Then finally, the share phase, where the whole class benefits from hearing different perspectives.
And you can use it for so many things.
Yeah.
Quick knowledge checks, problem solving.
All of it. But you can also make it even more effective with a few tweaks.
Like think, ink, pair, share.
Yes. Adding that writing step, the ink, is huge. Cognitive science tells us that the act of writing forces deeper processing. It makes you commit to an idea. It ensures every single student is engaged, not just the loudest ones.
And what about the anxiety of speaking in front of a big class?
For that, the think, pair, square variation is fantastic. Instead of sharing with the whole class, 2 pairs just combine into a group of 4. It's a bigger audience, but still small and safe. It builds confidence.
Because that share part of the standard model can be a real problem.
Research is pretty clear on this. Whole group discussions often don't capture the best ideas from the small groups. And the anxiety of being cold called can actually inhibit thinking. The goal has to be learning, not performance.
So what's the solution? Just get rid of the share phase.
You can. Some educators argue for that to maximize the time spent in peer discussion, which is where the richest learning happens. Or you can make it optional, or have students write down their final thoughts on cards. There are ways to maintain accountability without the pressure.
And there are other active strategies too, right?
Yeah.
Beyond just TPS.
Oh, definitely. For behavioral concepts, role play is excellent. It's much safer to experiment when you're playing a character. And of course, teaching is learning.
The best way to learn something is to teach it.
It forces a level of synthesis that you just can't get from passive listening. And even in huge lecture halls, you can use things like skeletal notes for students to fill in, or polling apps, or application cards, where they have to connect a concept to their own life before they leave.
We started this journey with a grilled hot dog that opened up this huge psychological gap between what's innate and what's learned. And we've seen that so many of our deepest reactions, cravings, fears, are these intricate learned associations, not just biological mandates.
Associative learning is truly the foundation. It runs from the simplest salivation reflex, through the consequences that shape our actions, all the way to the complex memory networks and higher order conditioning and semantic recall. It determines what we react to, why we value things, and how our entire internal world is structured.
So the key takeaway here is just recognizing the incredible, maybe even frightening, power of association in shaping almost every part of our experience. If you can learn to drool at a picture or learn to link a word with deep grief, it means your deepest impulses are fundamentally malleable.
Yes.
And recognizing the rules of that game, the rules of association, is really the first step in understanding the fragility of your own reality. It's understanding the ways External forces, advertisers, politicians, misinformation can exploit those learned mental pathways. Our world is constantly conditioning us, and knowing the mechanics is the only real way to understand the nature of your own free will.